I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. As directed by Manitoba Health, we're requesting people to avoid contact within 2 meters of anyone showing symptoms of a respiratory illness, such as coughing or sneezing. If you're experiencing flu-like symptoms, we are requesting that you excuse yourself from the room. Please note that when you join the meeting via Zoom, all participants will be placed in the waiting room and your microphones will be muted until the host lets you into the room. You can follow the hearing live via City Board of Revision YouTube channel. When your property is called upon, you will be allowed from the waiting room and permitted to speak with respect to your property. Once you have been heard, you can leave the meeting and continue to watch the hearing live via City Board of Revision YouTube channel. If any participants are currently watching the live meeting on YouTube, please mute your audio player now. I'll introduce the members first. Today we have myself, I'll be Marcel Larondo, I'll be chairing, Carrie Linklater is here, and Richard Whitbread as board members. And the assessors today will be Jason Brown, Jonathan Spazak, and our secretary is Michelle Napine. We will be hearing applications for the revision of assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application. We will limit discussions to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matter must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessment of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decision with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to an application of exemption from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. Use of cell phones is not permitted except by the approval of the chair. Over here. First property up will be address not applicable. I guess we don't have an address on it?
It's 610 Sterling Line.
610 Sterling Line? It's all the same?
Oh, sorry. No, you're right. The vacant land.
It's vacant land. But then it's, the owner is 100 610 58 Manitoba Limited. You want to swear to me?
Okay, Mr. Brown, we'll start with you. Can you state your full name, please?
Jason Brown.
You affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you. And for the applicant, can you state your full name, please?
Marcelo Navarro.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Jason, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is file number 20-881. It is a vacant industrial piece of land, roll number 060934700135. Current 2019 assessed value with a reference date of April 1st, 2016 is $171,000. And that is based on a rate per square foot of $5.84. The parcel is just under 30,000 square feet at 29,265. I would like to make a recommendation to reduce that rate from $5.84 down to $1.75 a square foot. This gives a revised assessment of $51,214, or rounded to $51,000.
Marcello, you okay with that?
Unfortunately, I just got the recommendation just before the hearing started, so I haven't even had time to send it to my owner for his acceptance of the recommendation. So without his acceptance, I can't accept it myself.
Okay, let's move ahead with it then, Jason.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So once again, site is 29,265 square feet. We are recommending a reduced rate of $1.75, which comes in rounded at 51,000 square feet. We can turn to page 2 of my evidence. There is an aerial photograph at the top. This is a small strip of land. The supplementary assessment is due to a replot. So this was part of a larger assemblage, which I will show later in my evidence, but this is what the site looks like now after the replot. So I'll just go through my comps and then we can talk a bit more about the site and then the comps. So I do have 6 comparable vacant land sales. These are all substantially higher than what my recommendation is, but that is due to adjustments I've made for the subject site, which we'll get into after. So these sales all are within the reference period, and they range from $4 up to $10.98 a square foot. All vacant industrial. Most of them are in the same area, which is the central St. Boniface area. So the first 3 are in the same area. The next 3 are in different areas. All similar sizes, ranging from just under 5,000 up to just under 90,000. And I do have some pictures of those comparables in my addenda. We can turn to page 5 of my evidence. There's a aerial view. So this is located in St. Boniface, near the Seine River, kind of between Des Murons and the Seine River, at the end of Youville Street. On page 6 shows the current configuration of the property, and below that shows the configuration before the replot. So this has always been, it's a road allowance. These parcels were obviously designed for access to these buildings in the rear, that back onto the Seine. So once again, it was the bottom of page 6 is what the parcel looked like before the replot, and the picture on top is what the parcel currently looks like. These are the 2 on page 7. These are the 2 access points. The first one is in the south, coming off Hamel Avenue, and the top is coming from the north off Deschambault. On page 8, this shows the replot that initiated this division and subsequent supplementary appeal. So we can see there was multiple parcels carved out. The southern section, which roll number ending in 8400, is currently proposed as being a condo unit or a condo development. And then the subject parcel is the one to the north of that, which is what we're hearing today. So I do have some comparable photos of my comparable properties. Comparable number 1, 405 Hamel. This was part we can see this parcel on the previous map being proposed as a condo development. That sold for $7 a square foot in 2014. Comparable number 2, also part of that same assemblage. If we look on page 8, it is the bottom parcel of that new parcel that is proposed as being a condo development. This was a $1 sale, so we are not relying on it. However, due to its proximity and similarity to the subject, I believe that it does give some insight as to what could possibly happen to the subject site. So that parcel was bought in order to access the new condo development. They wanted the access off Uville instead of Gabourey. So they had to buy that little strip of land to extend the access. Comparable number 3 at the bottom of page 10, this is a small strip of land. Sold in 2013, November 2013 for $200,000. It was purchased by the adjacent property owner. So obviously, the price per square foot of that sale was $11, obviously a bit high due to the sale being to the adjacent property owner. But I do contend that the subject property would be in a similar situation where it's most likely is going to be sold to an adjacent property owner for access to either the vacant land or the industrial building that's currently beside it. Similar to number 4, small strip of land. This one's off Clarence Avenue, also bought by the adjacent property owner and bought for access to the rearage of the property. Comparable number 5 at the bottom of page 11, small piece of land backing onto the rail lines between King and Princess off of Higgins near the underpass on Main Street. So similar concept, although this does have road access, but backing onto the train tracks and smaller piece of land. And then comparable number 6 on page 12 at the end of my brief. Once again, small strip of land. This one sold for $5.50 in 2011. And similar to the subject property in that it's a strip of land that was purchased for a larger assemblage in the long term. So based on that, we ask that the recommended revised assessment of $51,000 be considered. Thank you.
Marcello, any questions?
I do. Thank you. In terms of the recommendations, can you briefly explain what adjustments you have made to get to these new square foot rates?
Yes, thank you. So we basically looked at the situation of the parcel, it being a thin strip of land adjacent to residential and an industrial property. Former road allowance, we basically made adjustments due to the shape, the potential uses being reduced due to the shape and the location of it, and yeah, basically just due to the shape and the location and the reduced usage, permitted usages of the parcel.
Okay. So would you say that these adjustments are subjective based on your interpretation, not necessarily anything concrete written down by the department on how to make these adjustments?
Definitely subjective. Anytime you're doing direct comparison and making adjustments, there's not a lot of sales of these parcels that aren't sold to adjacent property owners.
Okay.
So yeah, it is subjective.
In terms of your comparable number one, I noticed that it has a PUC, a parcel use code of vacant industrial land. Yet the zoning is, I believe, RMFS, residential multifamily. It's either small or medium, one of the two. Can you explain that?
I would assume that that was the, yeah, because we have the zoning for that as M1, light manufacturing. Assuming that's what it was at the time of the sale.
It would have been at the time of the sale, but currently it's actually residential multifamily. I noticed that it hasn't changed yet. So it's still considered vacant industrial land? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, no, it has been rezoned to residential multifamily.
Yeah.
As part of that replat, most likely.
Okay. Now, in terms of Comp 3, can you explain to me what that is used for, the motivation of the purchaser? I mean, I think the current use would probably show the motivation, but did you have a chance to inspect this property and look what it's being used for?
I have, so that is Lavarondery, bowling alley, and there's some mixed use in that building as well. I haven't driven by it lately, but I would assume they're using that for parking now.
Correct. Okay. Thank you very much. Now, in terms of the properties that you've chosen, let's start with the first one. That is parcel or 405 Hamel. In terms of utility, so the size of the parcel, the configuration, that it fronts on at least one major street. Would you say that the utility is similar to the subject?
No, that is definitely a more useful site, bigger, better configuration, better access.
Okay.
Yeah, and being proposed as a condo development, obviously.
Right. So that kind of leads into my next question. And in these properties, did you look at what's possible in terms of development or possible use for your comparables?
Well, you'll see most of my comparables are long, skinny strips of land. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I chose this one due to its proximity to the subject and the fact that they, at one point, were part of an assembly. But yeah, no, I'm not obviously relying on that, especially given my recommendation is substantially lower than that value.
Okay. Would you agree that many of your comps actually do provide some type of utility to adjacent parcels? So allowing for some economic benefit from the purchase of those properties. Would you agree with that?
Yes, generally when you're buying a strip of land like this, it is going to be part of an assemblage, and it therefore is going to provide some kind of utility to the adjacent property owners.
Okay, so when I look at the comparable, or sorry, the subject and the adjacent parcel, can you tell me what additional utility it provides? Because from my perspective, I'm looking at the overhead picture on your brief. The parking is on the opposite side. The property line on the west side of the...
Which picture are you looking at right now, Mark?
So this would be in the assessor's page 6.
Just let us all get there.
Okay.
Page 6.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Now there is, on the west side of the subject, there are residential homes. On the east side, there is, I believe, an industrial property there that is currently rented out. I'm looking at this. I don't see much utility there. Can you explain why you think there may be some utility there?
I can. Obviously, I think we do agree that the utility is low, hence my recommendation. However, the industrial building to the east of the subject property, they also own that vacant parcel of land south of that.
Right.
So they do already have two adjacent pieces of property. I don't know what their future plans are for that southern portion that is vacant. But if they were to develop that, and we know that from the looking at the development plans for the 405 Hamel, they didn't want the access off of Gabourey, they wanted it off of Ubill.
Okay.
So that could happen in this case where they want the access off of Deschambault coming in from the north. But without them exploring and developing that site into something else, it's currently very low usage.
So the property beside, I believe it's 450 Deschambault, that's the industrial property. That is currently used for its intended purpose, correct?
Correct, but they did buy that southern parcel. So I don't know what their future is with that southern parcel. If they did decide to put condos on that parcel, at some point they would need some access.
Okay, so you're not aware of any type of development projects that are planned for this area, these three properties here, the two industrial properties plus the subject?
Not currently, no, but that doesn't mean that they haven't thought about it or explored it.
But there's nothing down on paper, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, I believe that is all my questions.
Thank you.
I will note to the chair that I do have a rebuttal. I don't know when
We have it further down, correct?
you should.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
Okay, thank you.
Richard?
Just one question for the assessor. What is the width of that property?
That is a good question.
Should be 66 feet. No.
Just bear with me. It is 16 meters, I believe.
So 50 feet possibly?
Yeah, about that. Yeah, about that, yeah.
And about 585 feet long then. Okay, so 50 by... Thank you, that's all my questions.
Carrie?
Just one question, Mr. Brown. To the best of your knowledge, has this property ever been listed?
No, I don't believe it has. That portion to the south, 405 Hamel is listed, but this parcel has not.
Okay, thank you.
Now, it was split off from which piece of property?
So on my page 6,
Yeah,
shows the previous parcel in the it's like highlighted in red or pink. So it was just a longer, skinnier strip, or same width but longer.
So cut off at Hamel Avenue?
It continued past Hamel all the way down to Gabourey, from Deschambault down to Gabourey.
Yeah, but that
Yes,
section has been removed. Was that section sold?
it's now part of the 405 Hamel, which is being developed as condominiums.
now that portion is that.
Well, actually, okay, so on my page 8, you can see 405 Hamel. It's the roll number ending in 8400.
Your page 8.
Yeah.
Hamels, Public Reserve.
So you'll see the parcel 606-1168400.
Yeah.
Located in the bottom right-hand quadrant.
Yep.
And so that's the excess of this parcel that was divided is now part of that parcel. And that's for access to the condo development off of Uville. You'll actually see some better pictures in the appellant's rebuttal.
Yeah, because Uville continues past that condo and up into there. Is that correct?
Correct.
So now they've made that a public reserve, that one section?
Yes, I believe it's going to be access and some park.
So now when you go to your other document, which is on page 6, that there's that commercial building to the west of it, east of it.
Yeah, that's an industrial building.
The property underneath that, you say is owned by that?
Yeah.
That's where the trail goes through along the Seine River, is that correct?
Correct. So that industrial building also that parcel.
The public trail goes through that property?
Yeah, it appears that they're allowing the trail to go through it at this point, but it is privately owned land.
But the trail is right along it's within what, basically the riverbank, is it not?
Yeah.
Developable
And you can see that trail continues to the northern parcel with the industrial on it. So I'm not sure if they're just allowing it at this point until they decide to develop it or what their plans are with that property. But as of right now, it's it's just the trail.
And who held the other property? It was part of which, prior to it being split off on top?
The industrial building on the right,
Yeah.
that's owned by a company called 450 Deschambault. And they own the parcel to the south too.
Yeah, and so the red line, was it a portion of that property before?
Yes.
So why did they split that off of that property?
I guess they just didn't need the northern portion. They only needed the southern portion for the access to the condo development. And then this was just surplus.
Okay, let's move on to your rebuttal, Marcello.
Okay. If you turn to page 2, please. So in my opinion, the comparable number 2 shouldn't be considered. And you can see in the picture below, that is a picture of comparable number 2. It is that small portion that is outlined in red around just along Gabourey Place and next to Uville. Now, if you look at the picture below, this is taken from the development proposal. Now, this development proposal was actually submitted to the city of Winnipeg in 2011, September 2011. Now, the sale, as you can see in the assessor's brief, I believe occurred in September 2012. So after this submission of this proposal. Now, the owners are of the 405 Hamel and the relevant other parcels are all part of the same group. They include my client, which also owns that surplus parcel, the subject just above. Now, in speaking with him, he indicated to me that on that parcel, there was no appraisal done. There's no estimate of market value. There was a declaration in terms of the sworn value, but he indicated to me that it was just a simple exchange of land between two parties. So they got a piece of land and somebody else got another piece of land. But his indication to me was that in no way was this a market transaction. So I question the validity of comparable number 2. And as you can see in page 3 of my rebuttal, please note that this submission to the City of Winnipeg, which includes the property that is indicated in as comparable number 2, that property, as indicated in the assessor's brief, sold in September 2012. This submission to the City of Winnipeg occurred in September of 2011, almost a year prior to. So again, I question the validity of comparable number 2. Comparable number 3, my reasoning for including this information was, I think the assessor already pointed to this, that this was bought essentially for additional parking. So there was some motivation there. And that is the continuation of the evidence, is that we're clearly seeing the motivation of these property owners and why they purchased these properties. For example, comparable number 4, if you turn to page 7, you can see the small access road, thin strip of land that they purchased, okay? But on the next picture, you get the full idea of why they purchased this piece of land. You can see the access through Clarence and into the back of their yard. So they're making rational decisions because on these purchases, because they're getting utility out of these properties. That is the same for the next property, which is comparable number 5, which was bought as parking for the Youth for Christ building that was built in 2010, where there was a permit for it taken out in 2010. So that is my rebuttal. I don't think that there is a fair comparison here between any of the comparables and the subject. So I'm open for questions on that.
Jason, any questions?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you're representing the owner of the subject property?
Correct.
And do you mind revealing who that is?
Is that a requirement? Do I have to answer that?
I don't believe you do, but I'm trying to figure out who. So it's a numbered company, correct?
The subject?
Yes.
Yes.
And you're contending that my comparable 2 was an internal sale?
No, not an internal sale. Just an exchange between 2 different developers. So there was no. What I'm trying to say here is that you're suggesting that it was like a market transaction. It was by no means a market transaction.
No, I'm not intending. I'm not contending that. I'm just trying to figure out who owns what pieces of property. I know you mentioned that A&S Builders was one of the purchasers.
Right. So if you look at page 7 of my, or page 3 of my rebuttal.
Yeah.
Okay. So you see the property that is outlined there.
Yeah.
Okay, that is my client.
So they own 405 Hamel as well?
Yes.
Okay. And do they own other parcels in this, or just the 405 Hamel and the subject property?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And so when they exchanged property for the comparable number 2, that was just with a completely separate developer?
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
And so basically your client owned the subject and 405. They basically divided it via replot. And now we're left with this small strip of land to the north.
Which has no utility, as you know, it would have been incorporated into the development initially, but there was just, there's no reason to have that strip of land.
Okay, well, why did they buy it in the original, in the first place? Was it in case they needed access to the parcel from the north?
No, I believe any time that, at least on the residential side, when there is a purchase of land like this, it would probably be just to provide additional lands, because every development has to provide some type of parkland dedication.
Okay, so in the end, they realized they didn't need it. They initiated a replot, and now here we are today.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, are they planning on selling it, or are they planning on keeping it?
Well, at this point, without anything happening to 450 Deschambault, that's where we're at, right? We're looking at the current physical condition of the property as it is today, with the, taking into account the market conditions on April 1, 2018 or April 1, 2016 for the 2019. Without something happening to 450 Deschambault, where they potentially change the use of that property, try to develop it into something else, it has very little utility, if any. As I pointed out in the overhead picture in your brief, the parking for the adjacent property at 450 Deschambault is on the opposite side. So you're not increasing any additional parking. You're not creating additional parking. It's of no benefit to that property owner. It would be to somebody who developed, who would potentially develop, knock down that industrial building and maybe develop it into something else down the road. But again, that would be speculation. And we're not valuing on speculation. We're valuing on market value, and the current utility of the property is what really drives the value today. And when you can't make money out of a parcel of land, you're actually paying X amount of dollars on taxes on it per year. It doesn't, you're not going to make a profit off of this parcel of land in its current incarnation. Now, again, I'm trying to emphasize that down the road, this thing could be developed, and that would change the market value potentially of the subject. But that is hypothetical. At this point, we're looking at what is currently there, and currently there's no development beside. There's no potential for it. I suppose it could be used as a back lane by the city, or it could be parkland dedication. Parkland dedications are often $1 exchanges. So again, that was the reasoning for my evaluation. I hope that explains.
No, that's great. Thank you. I will save the rest of my questions for after your submission. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard, any questions?
No questions, thanks.
Rebuttal?
No questions, thank you.
And I think I now understand what's going down, but when they did the replot on this property that you're showing, and they got that section of land to do the condos, they've also got the one to the south, is that correct?
Yeah.
The one on Carberry?
Yeah, that was the one that that was comparable number 2 on the assessor's brief. Okay. And that's the one that we're saying technically that wasn't a sale. That was just an exchange between two parties. No market evaluation was done on it, no appraisal. And as you can see by the submission in a year before, it was included in the submission. So that should automatically trigger something saying, well, there's something wrong here. How could that have been included as evidence in a submission to the city of Winnipeg? Yes.
But the other piece of property that's there in the corner that's on your, not the red piece,
mm-hmm.
The other one, is it not part of the same development?
You're not talking about my subject, are you?
Your subject property is the one on page stream of your rebuttal? You got that black outline.
No, that's not the subject. The subject is to the north of that.
I know.
Is that,
But
it's
this
actually-
property here that you've shown here, what used to be part of it,
yes, it used to be part of it. That's
Okay.
right.
and this property that's been subdivided, that's here now, shown in black, is being
Yeah.
developed with the one to the south, is it not?
That's correct.
So that southern piece that's not marked is part of this whole development.
That's right.
So they're gonna have access from Gabry, they're gonna have partial access off of Uville.
Yeah.
They've got access on the top east corner to the park.
Hamel.
But also it'll be on the east side. It's to the Seine River.
That's right. There is a large parkland dedication off of the Seine River.
Yeah.
And if you notice on page 3, the parcel on the northeast corner of that black outline, there is actually now a small triangle there, a very small triangle
Mhm.
that was also dedicated as parkland.
Correct. That was at the end of Hamel.
Yeah.
So that's there. Okay, I'm good. Let's move on to your presentation.
Okay.
1 second. Applicant here. Marcello, you're up.
Okay, so you can look at page 2. 171,000 is the current assessment. The requested assessment was $1. Again, I think I've made my position clear on why I suggested $1. At this point, this lot has no utility other than maybe a parkland dedication. Now, on page 2, you can see the subject, 29,265 square feet, zone M2. This is a remnant, a leftover of a planned right-of-way. That said, right now, there is no opportunities for a road right-of-way at the moment. Now, in terms of highest and best use, I took a logical step at this and actually consulted on this. In terms of physical possibilities, in consultation with the city planning department, their opinion was that because the configuration does not really lend itself to anything but a right-of-way. Single-family dwellings, row housing, because the configuration of the lot, it would need proper access, has a number of constraints, awkward geometry, poor connectivity. So housing in itself is not, in their opinion, possible at this point. Now, in terms of legal uses, obviously it's zoned M2, so there are some possibilities under that legal use. For example, if the adjacent owner wanted to purchase it, however, adding a strip of land to at this time, I don't know what additional utility it would provide them in its current configuration as an industrial building. So in terms of legal uses, there are some considerations to be made, but not many. Financial feasibility, again, tight. So if you scroll down to maximally productive, you'll see some commentary. So in addition to the development potential of this site, it lies with consolidating with 450 Deschambault, which would assist in transitioning this to residential away from industrial uses. If you are familiar with this part of St. Boniface, that has been the trend to move away from the traditional industrial uses that were there into more intensive uses like residential multifamily. However, in that, the potential party developer would have to take a lot into consideration, upgrades to water, sewer servicing, as well as dedication to parkland. So there are a lot of considerations to be taken at this point, which would make this at this time not really feasible. So we don't see much utility in this property. In fact, I struggle to find any highest and best use for this property. And it may be a dedication or parkland. I don't know at this point, but because of the constraints of not having the adjacent property zoned to something else that would provide more utility for this site, at this point, there isn't much that can be done with it. In terms of sales, I used only 4 sales here. There are challenges to finding comparables for this property. That is true. Now, if you look at the comparables, you can see some pictures in the appendix. Index 1 is kind of a similar situation. So it's a property right beside, it's a long strip of land. It's along an industrial property there. So it's in between industrial properties. And that's what makes this sale different, is that it can provide additional utility to adjacent properties because they share similar use. And there is some economic advantage to owning additional land along this strip. So that's what makes Dugald not exactly appropriate. Now, number 2, again, is just an open parcel. It has no constraints on it. It does have a set of railroad tracks in the back, but that is really not a significant issue in terms of developing this parcel of land. Number 3, Clarence, we had no picture of it, so I just gave a generality as to where it was located. I don't believe the role actually exists anymore in the city system, so we had some problems locating it. Number 4, again, not really many constraints to developing it. There you have beyond that the principal use table for zoning. And that is my presentation.
Jason, questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Navarro, your contention is that this property doesn't have a lot of use. Its highest and best use is low. And your valuation of $1 implies that this piece of property could almost be considered a burden to the property owner?
Well, if you ask me if I would pay, for example, $20,000 for it at this point, no, because I'm not willing to pay $4,000 in taxes annually for something that I can't derive any income out of. So, yeah, that would be my answer.
So would they be willing to give it to the city?
I'm sure if the city approached them at this point, they may consider it because, again, there's not much that you can do with it other than maybe an extension of the parkland dedication to the south.
Okay. Well, I do agree that the current assessment is too high, and therefore I give the recommendation that's significantly lower. I do feel $1. I guess this is more of a statement than a question. Do you not think that a parcel of land should at least cover its carrying costs to the city in terms of what it costs the city to administer for this piece of property?
I don't think that that's the consideration in terms of the market value of a property. Again, I've seen properties that have negative value. But that said, I think you should, I don't know if you caught my commentary on this. So currently the tax bill is approximately $4,000. Now, that's not significant if you can provide or at least get some type of utility out of this lot. So, for example, if you had a house on this with a huge back, long, narrow yard, at least it would be providing some utility to it so you could justify the tax bill on it. However, when you can't even derive income from this, then what is the point of it? You are simply incurring, X amount of dollars in taxes on an annual basis for something that you're not generating anything on, and you can't generate anything on.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Carrie, any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Richard?
I have no questions. Thank you.
On your map, on your page 6,
6.
is there 2 houses on, one's on Cabela and the other one on Deschambault? Have they got access through that laneway or what?
What page again?
On your page 6?
My page 6.
Your page, that not, no, it's assessor's page 6, I'm sorry.
Oh.
It just, I meant to ask you this question before because it seems to be there's access through there. On the west side of that corner, right at Deschambault, are they accessing those properties from there?
Yeah, you can, Mr. Chairman, if I can interject, you can see the picture on the bottom of page 7. That's taken from Deschambault. So those houses are using it as a type of driveway at this point.
Yeah. I'm not sure that that's a legal use right now. The city may not have caught that, but I wouldn't say that that's a legal use. I mean, in fact, at the bottom half off of Hamel, the city has actually blocked it off.
Mm-hmm. But they blocked it off after the homes.
Actually, right at Hamel. I tried to enter there just a couple of days ago, and there were cement blockades there. So
okay, so it was being used at one time. Now, your client created this plot of land, correct?
It's again, I think in my brief I called it a leftover. So yeah, it was a result of the subdivision for the development at 405 Hamel. So it had no future potential for this property for the 405 development. So it was, again, I addressed it as an economic leftover.
Economic leftover. I've got no further questions. Anything in summation? Start with you, Marcello.
The only thing that I would suggest is that the board consider the notion that the value of a property should be based on what economic benefit that you should be able to attain from that parcel of property, whether it's an improved property or a bare parcel of land. In this case, I think I've made the case that there is very little to no utility in this property at the moment. So in that sense, there is a burden on the property owner because they're paying $4,000 in taxes to hold this thing. However, again, going back to this notion that there has to be some economic benefit to holding on to this. And at this point, there isn't. There may be down the road, but that's a different question altogether because we are looking at the physical condition of the property as it exists today in the current market conditions on April 1, 2016 for the 2019 tax year. So there are no developments down the road. So again, I think I've made my point. Thank you.
Jason?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, we're not contending that the model value of $171,000 is justified. We have offered a significant reduction to $51,000, which we feel is more accurate. And we obviously don't agree with the $1. We feel it's worth more than that in its current shape. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. That will conclude that matter. We'll move on to 610 Sterling Lyon. Want to invite him in?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, we have 2020 on this as well.
Oh, I thought we dealt with both of them at once. I'm sorry.
I can be quick on this. It's going to be a lot of the same information. but I'll just offer my recommendation.
On to the 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is file number 20-82, roll number 060934701335. Same piece of property as the previous file. Current 2020 assessment at $188,000 using a reference date of April 1st, 2018. I'd like to make a recommendation to reduce that to $2 a square foot, which would be rounded at $59,000. Going forward, all the same information as the previous file, all the same comparables. So, barring any questions, we feel the recommendation of $59,000 is fair. Thank you.
Marcello, questions?
I have no questions. These are the same comparables, so I think the analysis is the same. There's no need to ask questions again.
Panel members are good? Okay, Marcello, you have a presentation you want to make on this one? Or is it
It's the same valuation methodology. I've gone for a value of $1. So if the assessor doesn't have any questions, it's the same thing as the previous one. I don't think there's a need to really
drag it on?
Yeah, drag it on.
Jason, you have no questions, do you?
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And committee members have no questions?
No.
That will conclude that matter.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for catching my mistake, Jason.
No problem. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to Sterling.
Mr. Chair.
You need a break? Sure. We're going to take a 5 minutes.
I can swear them in.
Yes, please swear them in.
And this has a 2019, 2020 by the looks of things too, Marcel.
Huh?
It has a 2019, 2020 to it as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll catch this one.
I can swear the assessor in.
Yes, please.
Can you state your full name, please?
Jonathan Spacek.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And Mr. Reimer, can you state your full name, please?
Jeremy Reimer.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Jonathan, when you are ready.
All right. Good morning, everyone. We have the address 610 Sterling Line Parkway. It is a vacant piece of commercial land. Roll number 10067777315. We have a 2019.
Yes, 10.
Oh, thank you. 2019 roll year. We also have the 2020. This is due to it originally being vacant industrial land, and it is zoned commercial. It has been replotted and adjusted to commercial land, so that's why we're getting new values effective 2019 and carries over to 2020. So the 2019 value is $2,006,000. This is based on 74,315 square feet on the parcel, and it is at a rate of $26.99. If you look at my page 2, you can see the top picture is the final replotted land. You can see there's been 2 parcels that have been put together from my picture 2 shows how those 2 parcels looked before and how they've been replotted into one larger parcel. Currently, there is being developed a single-story retail sort of commercial little building, from my understanding. If you turn to my page 3, you can see a breakdown of that land size and net rate I was speaking of. And I have put together, and I guess I should say where this one is. So we're on Sterling Line Parkway, right by the IKEA there, just off of Kenniston. You can see at my top picture off of Sterling, the west side of Kenniston, you turn onto Sterling Lion, and you can turn into the IKEA there, that whole, you can see exactly where the parcel of land is there. And on my page 3, we have 6 comparables. I would just like to point out right now, as I was reviewing this, I realized I put one comparable that was for my 2020. So I would like to ask Mr. Reimer and you all, would you like me to exclude it for this one, or are we going to cover everything on this one and just go over the updated rate in 2020 as they are all the same? I'm not sure what the best way to handle this is, or if you just want me to ignore it on this one. Once we get to 2020, just add this one comparable. It's the only difference I have.
Gary?
I'm very comfortable sort of having a general discussion together, but Mr. Chairman, whatever you feel is best. I'm not fussed either way in this case.
Okay, let's roll them both together then.
Sounds good. I'll go over the difference once I get there. So my page 3 shows the 6 land comparables I have picked from the area for this parcel of land. You can see comparable 1 is no address on Kenniston, but if you turn to my page 4, I've included pictures of them all to give you a better idea where they are. They are all relatively close to the subject building. Comparable 1 is very close. It is right across the street from the subject, and it is on the west side of Kenniston. So you can see, just load this, sorry. Closed it here. So that first comparable was sold January 20th, 2016. So just before the April 1st, 2016 reference date. It's 87,342 square feet, which is very close to our subject. Our subject is 74,315 feet. It has the exact same zoning as C4 and is sold for $28.62. This one is to, from my understanding, become a dealership in the future, is the plans on that lot. And again, that was my first comparable. Second comparable is 485 Sterling Line Parkway. This is just north of the last. It's adjacent north to the comparable I was just speaking about. It sold July 23rd, 2015. It is larger in size at 135 square feet, 135,621 square feet, same zoning C4, and it sold for a total of $28.72. So both of those lots sold for right around the $28 mark before the reference date, most comparable in my opinion. And if we move on to comparable 3, that's the one that's for the 2020 appeal. I will go over it quickly. It sold February 12th, 2018. So again, this is for the next reference date, but you can see where it's located in my third picture, comparable number 3. It's actually in the same larger lot that the subject is in, and it's on the west side of the subject. It has a permit for a hotel to be built on it, but it's sold for $22.95. It's zone C4 and its size is 89,127. So again, closer to the subject size than all my other comparables. If we look at comparable number 4, this is 50 Center Street. So this is in Bridgewater. It's a little farther out. I'm not putting as much weight on this one, but it's a commercially zoned lot that sold in May 2014. It's 135,000 square feet in size, so it's larger. It sold for $23.68. And then my comparable 5 and 6, I've included 2 more comparables that are sold in the same larger lot as the subject, as you can see from the pictures. They're located on the southwest side of the larger lot where the subject is. And one of them, this comparable number 5 became Cabela's, but I just want to point out it sold back in June of 2012. So it is much larger in size at 281,000 square feet. And it also sold a while ago, but it sold for $16.30. And if you look at comparable 6, this one is directly beside the Cabela's. It was a vacant lot that sold in 2014. Again, 217,000 square feet in size, sold for $14.92. So if you look at my range of comparables, they range from $14 for the earliest sold to $28 for the most recently sold. I wanted to include those lower sales in the lot, although they were older. I believe they would need to be appreciated for time and because of the development that has happened since. The area is more appealing to build on. These lots are selling for more now, and they are also much larger in size. So there's an economies of scale at play where you're selling 200,000+ square feet for a lower price back in 2012. So those are the rationales for my land comparables I've included. If you have any questions about those, let me know. But again, I do believe the first and second are the most comparable to the subject lot based on size and time of sale and location. If you have any more questions. I don't think I'm missing anything. Thank you.
Mr. Reimer, any questions?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Spacek, I'm going to refrain from that one sale because we are technically now dealing with the 2019 assessment. So the one sale that's post-reference, I'll make reference to that and perhaps incorporate my questions on that in the second submission. Just, Mr. Chairman, to frame the discussion, Mr. Spacek's used the same comparables for both briefs. My comparables are also the same for both briefs, save and except for one additional one for 2020. So you'll see a lot of similarities in the second hearing for 2020. I think could be quite expedited as a result of that. Mr. Spacek, you alluded to the fact that the assessment of the subject was the current assessment, supplementary assessment, was issued as a result of there were two former roll numbers that were combined into one to create the larger parcel, correct?
Yes, I believe the owner requested a replot of these parcels to be one.
Okay. Now, one point quickly, you had mentioned that your understanding was that there was a development on the site, but are you aware that as it sits today, it's just greenfield, the same greenfield that you're showing in your photos in your materials?
Yeah, the second picture is the most recent one I have as of, I don't have the date on there, but right near 2020. And it just has the pad from what I can see of where they're going to build the building. That's as it is now, from my understanding, yes.
Yeah, exactly. And so I can confirm, Mr. Spacek, there's no development whatsoever going on the property, just so the board and we are all
yeah, as of the reference date, nothing's built yet, for sure.
Well, and as of today.
Yeah, okay, as of today,
As of today, there's no activity whatsoever, and certainly I'm going to suggest that some of the market activity would have a bearing in this case. So if we move to your page 2, and you've got two photos there, you've got the aerial shot on the top, and then the lower photo. So this shows the two former parcels that have now been amalgamated into one. That was 606 and 610, correct?
Yes, from my understanding.
Okay, and then again, what we've got to the immediate west of the subject, that's the Assiniboine Credit Union, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, the boundary, the drive-through for the credit union that goes from the east of the building around to the north of it and to the other side, that access is in fact over a significant component of the subject's. It crosses into the subject's line, correct?
Yeah, it does, for sure.
And there's also some significant utility boxes at the north end of the property that would prohibit development of any kind anywhere near those boxes to the north, correct?
Like for a build, like you couldn't build a building over them. No, you could pave around them maybe, or you use the space around it if you wanted, I'm sure.
I'd suggest that the utility companies would not want you doing anything as far as parking or vehicles moving around anywhere near those boxes, Mr. Spacek. So I'm suggesting that has no utility.
I would disagree.
Okay. Are you aware of what activities from these significant utility boxes would be allowed?
Well, I mean, you can build pavement to garbage bins, as the picture shows, and I've seen other lots with transformers where you can park right up to them. They pave up to them. They make the most make the most use of the space as possible around those boxes. I would just agree. I don't think it's undevelopmental.
We'll agree to disagree on that point.
Absolutely.
Okay, with respect to your comparables then, so you've mentioned two comparables, the first two, comps 1 and 2, those are located to the north of Sterling Line Parkway, correct?
Yes.
And they're located within the outlet, the massive outlet mall that has been developed in the north there, correct?
They are, yes.
Okay, and the comparable number 1, that is the what is to be the and you mentioned the car dealership. That's to be the Porsche dealership developed on there, correct?
Yes, a dealership is to be built.
And the 485 Sterling Line, that's comp 2. That's where the Audi dealership actually has been developed on.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. So the parcels, though, that are located on the same side, and again, I'm going to leave out the February 18th transaction for now, but the parcels that are located on the same side of the road as the subject is 580 and 590. That's your comparables 5 and 6. So those are the two that are located to the south of Sterling Line, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Now, so let's take a look on going to page 4 of your materials. So the comparable number 1, this is the where the Audi dealership is to be, or sorry, the Porsche dealership is to be built. That has direct exposure. It's the address is Sterling Line and the access is through the outlet mall, of course, but the exposure is directly to Kenaston, correct?
For the dealerships, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that would be the same for comparable number 2. They're both located with direct exposure on Kenaston Boulevard.
They are, yes.
Okay. And you've alluded to comparable number 3, just so we're all clear. That's in Bridgewater, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Comparable, 4 on mine, but yes, for sure.
Oh, yes. Comparable 4. Yes, I'm skipping over 3 for the moment.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, if we go to your page 5, comparables 5 and 6, those are the two larger parcels. So the subject, now on these maps, it's still shown as the 2 parcels, but the subject is sort of in that axis that you mentioned, just around the roundabout. They've been amalgamated into one, and the 2 larger parcels are located to the west, sort of at the what would amount to the southwest corner of that site, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, those are my questions. Thank you.
Carrie, any questions?
Not at this time, thank you.
Richard?
No, I have none. Thank you.
I'm good at this time. Let's move on to your presentation then, Mr. Reimer.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And I will just make sure that I'm reading from my 2019 and not my 2020.
Sorry to interrupt. I did, due to the wait, I kind of did forget, but I do have a small rebuttal package. Do you want it handed out now? Sorry to interrupt. I forgot to bring it up right at the start because I emailed it at the start of the day.
But you're going to do the rebuttal after he puts his.
For sure. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure it was known. I kind of forgot. Sorry.
I'll be back with you on your rebuttal to his.
Okay, so
after you've asked the questions. Go ahead, Gary. I'm sorry.
thanks, Mr. Chairman. So we've got the 2019 supplementary assessments effective October 15th, 2019, and the present assessments $2,006,000, and the requested value for 2019 effective October 15th is $1,041,000. The parcel, as Mr. Spacek has indicated, it's off Sterling Line Parkway, and it's noted on the bottom of page 2 of our materials. It's resulted from the amalgamation of 2 previous smaller roll numbers on the site. And again, on page 3, there's an aerial shot of that parcel. So on page 4, the subject is 610 Sterling Parkway, which is part of the Seasons of Tuxedo development west of Kenaston. The supplementary assessment for 2019 and 2020 was the area that we had calculated was 74,052 square feet. So it's slightly smaller. I'm certainly not, I'm very comfortable with Mr. Spacek's advice that the total area is 74,315. So either one of those figures certainly were very, very close. But here's the difference, I believe. Part of the difference, and certainly the approach is that there's a significant segment of the land that's not capable of development for the reasons that I alluded to in my cross-examination that I'll be getting into shortly. 17% of that parcel is not capable of any meaningful development as a result of that. Land is zoned C4 commercial. So if we then move down to page 6, and Mr. Spacek had alluded to this, that the reason for the supplementary assessment being issued was the fact that it was sort of a commercial property and commercial zoning. No doubt about that. But it had been in this condition for some time, so I'm not sure what the reasoning or the timing was. I do note that the previous assessed values totaled for the 2 smaller parcels, as they then were, totaled $884,000. So the assessment for 2019, and that should say original 2019 assessment, not 2020, but the original 2019 assessment was less than $1 million. Quite frankly, and as you can see from my requested value, that strikes me as being on the light side, but $2 million certainly, I believe, is overshooting the mark in this case. as we've talked about and as shown in the aerial photographs, there's a significant component that's being used for the Assiniboine Credit Union drive-through, and it's also used as their garbage bin. And there's also those utility boxes, substantial utility boxes located at the north end of the site. And that I'm suggesting very strongly would render that component of the site incapable of any meaningful development. Certainly, as Mr. Spacek, at a minimum at least, and we can both agree, you can't put any buildings on there. And I'm going to suggest that parking in and around those boxes and to the north by that signage would really not be feasible, and that that has a significant impact on value in this case. So if we go down to page 7, it's just some further aerial shots showing the sort of box and the piece coming off of the Assiniboine Credit Union access towards the left, that would be the west boundary. That's the garbage bin in the box, and then towards the east of that, the utility boxes and the pylon sign for the subject. So then going on to page 8, there's some ground street view photographs showing the location of the utilities and that garbage bin. And page 9, there's another aerial shot showing those components. And then what we've got, so at the bottom of page 9, I've calculated the area, the affected area, and this is both for the drive-through itself and also that segment of the land that's approaching the garbage bin and the utility boxes, and that is not land that is capable of development in my submission. Again, I'm not going to suggest they couldn't pave around it, but in a practical sense, it's going to have very little use. There's the development of the any improvements on the site and the parking and such is all going to be to the south of that component of the land, and of course to the east of the access. They can't block Assiniboine Credit Union's access for their drive-through that's been established there. Incidentally, we conducted the appeal of the Assiniboine Credit Union site. That property is valued on the income approach, and certainly that valuation fully incorporated the value of the land that access around it to their drive-through. So that is something that is already included in the value of that site. So the commercial sales, I'm now on page 10. There's a remarkable degree of similarity actually in the sales presented by Mr. Spacek and ourselves. As you can see, we've got a sale of 1400 Keniston. That was a sale that Mr. Spacek didn't have in his materials. This was a 2014 sale with frontage on Keniston at $13.80 a square foot, and that's actually the new Mercedes-Benz dealership that was developed there. So that's another auto dealer. And these auto dealer sites, certainly I'm suggesting in no uncertain terms, have a tendency to sell for a premium, and they are based on very specific locations with high visibility. That's precisely what you're seeing with 1400 Keniston. That's what you're seeing with the second comp, which is the roll number ending in 6115. That's the same comparable that Mr. Spacek had at 87,364 feet at 2862. And that is to be the future owner of the Porsche dealership. Again, I'm suggesting in no uncertain terms that sale's got a premium attached to it based on the exposure and the use to which it's intended to be put. Then we've got 590 Sterling Lion, which is on the same south of Sterling Line, much larger piece, absolutely, but it also sold for $14.92 a square foot. And then we've got 485 Sterling Parkway, which is again the other sale that Mr. Spacek also had as materials. That's the Audi dealership, again with the address is on Sterling Line Parkway, but it's located directly. It's got frontage on Keniston with that exposure, and there's a premium that was paid for that exposure. So those two sales certainly, I'm suggesting, would command an exceptionally high premium relative to the subject. Just to give the board a sense with the subject development, this is called the Seasons of Tuxedo on the south side of Sterling Lion. This is not a development. And I'll be very blunt on this. This is not a development that has come to fruition the way that the developers thought it would. In fact, it's very, very much underperformed despite ongoing efforts leasing and development efforts since it was first developed about 10 years ago. There has been some tenants had moved in, already gone, has been vacated. There's been difficulties in, and this is now in the sort of the strip at the south end of the property. There's been difficulties in leasing it up, and there's significant components of land that are simply not being developed because there isn't any demand. And that's why I wanted to be clear in my question with Mr. Spacek and the statement I made. This parcel has no development on it at this time. It is available, but the demand simply hasn't been there, and the development has been proceeding much more slowly than anticipated, and it just hasn't been performing the way that they had hoped given its proximity to IKEA. That impacts, I'm going to suggest, as well, the value of the parcel of land that we should place on it. And certainly when you look at that relative to development of these car dealerships in premium locations with full exposure to Kenniston, two very, very different animals, I'm suggesting. That then is compounded, I'd suggest, by the direct impact of the Assiniboine Credit Union access that's required in those utility boxes. And as a result of all of that, and on pages 10, 11, and 12, I've got the maps and the sales data, again, for the most part, identical with what Mr. Spacek's presented. As a result of all of that, then at the bottom of page 12, we're suggesting a value of $20 a square foot based upon the entire parcel, including that area that I'm suggesting is not capable of any development and has very, very, very little value. So 74,052 feet is the number I've used. At $20 a foot comes in at $1,481,000. If one takes the net land area, taking out the Assiniboine Credit Union access, taking out the Assiniboine Credit Union waste disposal area, and taking out that area where the utility boxes are, that is not going to be generating any revenue at any point, that equals then a rate based on a net area of 61,350 square feet, a net rate of $24 a square foot. So it's actually certainly approaching something that even those car dealerships with much better exposure, much higher value in terms of the location of the properties and the utility of the properties, but notwithstanding the much lower demand that's been demonstrable at this south end of the Sterling line, the $24 rate based on the net land area that is capable of development, I'd suggest, is appropriate. So our request this morning is to reduce the 2019 supplementary assessment to $1,481,000. Thank you.
Jonathan, questions?
You know what? I actually have no questions. I just the only point of contention I just have some rebuttal on, so I'll just explain it during that, and I think that's enough. Thank you.
Okay, Richard.
Just a bit of confusion on my part. Are you suggesting that ACU, the Assiniboine Credit Union, is encroaching on the land that we're discussing?
Absolutely. So, Mr. Chairman, encroaching isn't quite, I mean, it's been developed with a significant component of the ACU site being used from the subject land. So if we go to the best photograph is probably, well, let's start with page 6, please. So at the bottom of page 6, there's the aerial that shows the whole parcel. And so the Assiniboine Credit Union is the building that's located on the site to the immediate west of the subject. And you'll see, now I'm referring to the Assiniboine Credit Union building itself. This would be at the southeast corner of that building. There's a few parking spots there, and those are the back end of those spots actually back onto the subject. But more importantly, when you drive, and now you'd be driving along the south of the building, like on the parking lot, but then to access the drive-through access is such that you actually cross into, now you're driving east, you cross into the pavement and the drive for the subject property, or the Assiniboine Credit Union property, and you're on the subject property. Then you head north around the building, and you go past the garbage pickup folks would be using this as well. But it's also meant for the drive-through where you drive around and to the north of the building. And that segment all along the east side of the building is actually located to the south of the garbage bin, is actually located on the subject property. So there is a significant component that is impacted by the Assiniboine Credit Union and the measurement of that. If we go,
I wouldn't want us to be misled by that information, because that is the secondary access to the drive-through. If you come in from the left, there is a primary access to the drive-through. And so it seems to me that it would be very simple to ask ACU to move the garbage bins and take out that section of the drive-through.
You could ask them to do that, but certainly that's not the, when I drove out there and to inspect it, it's possible to move it, but I don't believe that Assiniboine Credit Union would want to have that done at this stage, having set it up the way they have. But yeah, is it possible? Absolutely, but that's not what we're dealing with. The physical development of it right now certainly is, as I show on my page 9, at the bottom of my page 9, the segment that I've taken out there as incapable of development includes that drive, in addition to the much larger component, to the north of utility boxes and such. But I have certainly included it on the assumption that it would stay the way it is.
I understand your position. Thank you. No further questions.
Carrie?
Yeah, Mr. Reimer, I'm just wondering how this actually occurred.
So it's the same developer / owner for the entire season's development. So the strip components that would be to the west, which includes some restaurants, a doctor's office and such, so that's directly west, this credit union, everything to the south. So the Assiniboine Credit Union, the location of that building relative to this assessed lot line, I can't tell you why they placed it exactly the way they did. I would imagine it was based on the Assiniboine Credit Union's parking requirements and such. But what has happened, they of course, the developers clearly took the position that, well, to the extent that this access and this garbage bin, and quite frankly, the utility boxes, to whatever extent that impacts this parcel, we're going to live with that because the Assiniboine Credit Union is a tenant we want to have, and so we'll go with their requirements. As to why they didn't shift the credit union sort of further west by 30 or 40 feet, that I don't know.
Thank you.
And again, I guess the ones, don't forget that we're talking about two segments of two impacts here. And if you go back to the bottom of my page 9, this is the calculation of the segments that are impacted. The majority of that land area, there's a small component, or reasonably small component, that is sort of flowing from this axis, but the majority of that land area is flowing from those utility boxes, and the land to the north of that that would be impacted. So there's two different components of this impact.
Sorry, one more question. Did you say that there's already a pad existing on this?
There is, when you look at, what's the best photo?
Sort of looks like it on your page 9.
Yeah, so there is a pad and nothing, like there's no other development going on. So at the top of page 9, there's a portion that's been there. I'm going to suggest for I'm not sure how it got there. It's been there for quite a while. And again, I went out to inspect it. I had the impression from certain information that I ran across on the web that development was already starting, and that's not the case. I went out there and there's certainly the brochure that I saw was dated from last year, and there's been no development whatsoever. And it sort of is a function again of the lack of demand that I'm talking about. So it's available, without question. It's available for development if the demand is there, but to date, it certainly hasn't been there. So there's been no shovels hitting the ground or no improvements being put on the site other than the remnants of that pad that are on there.
Okay, so then can you share with us what that development was proposed to be?
Well, there's been no specific, there's no building plans or anything else yet. It's saying if you want to come, we'll build it, but we're not going to build it unless you're sort of coming. So the plan certainly would be at the south end of that lot to put another commercial strip on there. like that's what it will be. But the question is when that the demand will be such that it will actually be feasible to do it. That's what remains unknown.
Okay.
Like it's just not going anywhere right now.
Okay. And would there be an agreement between ACU and that tenant in terms of parking, to share that parking?
So when you go to page 6, for instance, like Assiniboine Credit Union having established this access, I very much doubt, and this was to Mr. Whitbread's point, I very much doubt they're going to want to readjust what they've already got in place. That would have been the subject of what they had in their lease with the owners. The development on that page 6 there, so the development of the strip would be sort of, you can see not just sort of running east from the front, or what should be the south end of the Assiniboine Credit Union building. There's sort of a line there. So the development of any retail strip would be from that general area, perhaps bumping up a bit further north, but not much, because you're going to run out of space from a width perspective, but really going very far south. So moving the retail strip to the southern part of that building, and then that parking area, that would become sort of, and this is common in this entire development, it's a communal parking area. So it's not going to be that Assiniboine Credit Union, I don't think, would have exclusive access to those parking stalls that are located to the south of the building. The strip that would be developed on the subject parcel, some of that parking would likely be at the southern end and possibly northern end of the building up to a point. But then all of that sort of parking on the parcels to the west, and that would include part of the Assiniboine Credit Union lot at the southern end, and the lot that's to the south of that as well. Parking would be used throughout there for sure, and that's consistent with, if you look at the retail developments that are further west, there's a series of buildings with, as I say, restaurants and doctors and such, and the parking, it's a segmented set of improvements, but the parking is sort of communal through that whole area, and this would be sort of an extension of that between the Assiniboine Credit Union and any development that happens on this site.
Okay, thank you.
Richard, you said you had another question.
I do. So if we accept your premise that an ACU, Assiniboine Credit Union, would be unwilling to move off the applicant's property, then it seems like what you're asking us to do is make a decision at this board that would significantly impact or reduce the size of land or piece of land that we're talking about in this application. It seems to me that that's maybe a place for another venue, a negotiation between your owner and the Assiniboine Credit Union, rather than this board making that decision to reduce the size of that property. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, with respect, Mr. Whitbread, I'd very much disagree. At the end of the day, what we're valuing here is a parcel of land as assessed, and the department's got the assessment on it. There's no doubt about it. But again, I've pointed out two components. The Assiniboine Credit Union, and let's go back please to my page 9, at the bottom of my page 9.
That's where I am.
So if you look at that map, and you've got the total area there is 12,700 feet. Of that, though, if you take out, if you want to assume that Assiniboine Credit Union would do the things they needed to do in order to remove the access and basically cut that off, we're still left with a land area that is at least 2/3, if not closer to 70% of what I'm suggesting, because of that segment to the north where the utility boxes are. Because I am certainly suggesting in no uncertain terms, there is no feasible development that's available approaching those utility boxes and heading to the north of them, or in that corner. There's very, very limited use that can be put to that, possibly more signage, but that's about it. So you've got that component. So no, I'm not suggesting, that's why I'm saying we're valuing the entire parcel and I'm calling it 74,000 feet at $20 a square foot. And that's intended to reflect the sales data, which I'm suggesting, if you recall, the $28 sales for car dealerships with frontage on Kenniston, far superior to the subject. We've got a land parcel of 74,000 feet to the south of Sterling Line, with a demonstrably lower demand, and the land sales to the south of that we've examined so far, to the south of Sterling Line, bear that out. Now they are larger sales, granted, but neither, I'm not asking for $14 or $15. I'm suggesting $20. The statement I've made relative to the lower land area, the developable land area, is that equals a rate of $24.14 for a land area that truly would be, fully capable of development. So I'm not suggesting in any way that, that we're somehow changing the land area. Not at all. What I'm saying is there are practical considerations affecting this parcel, affecting the development, the capability of development of the parcel, that are negative influences, and I've adjusted for that using the $20 rate applied to the entire parcel.
Thank you.
Looking at the way they laid it out, the access to this entire development, taking in the 3 lots, is all through the one piece, correct? The one drive?
It would be all through, so let's find a photo that is going to demonstrate that. I might have to go back to Mr. Spacek's photos because they were zoomed out further.
Yeah, on page 2 covers it all on his.
Yeah, exactly. So what you've got is the access coming off of Sterling Line Parkway, and then you go through the roundabout and you head through to the first sort of curb cut is the lot that would be access to the lot to the west, at the southern end of the subject lot to the west of that. Yeah.
Okay, so now I guess what I have problems with it on this type of development and how it's taxed is the credit union makes it look like they've got a better chunk of the parking on their lot. So they would be paying for the tax on that portion?
Well, the credit union is certainly paying the property tax for the entire property that you see in the boundaries there, and they're valued on the income approach. So the presumption with the income approach is that the presumption in valuing it is that it's got sufficient land and sufficient access to the drive-through and such to serve its needs. In this case, part of that access is on the subject parcel and actually not on that piece. A small part of it, but a part of it nonetheless.
But a lot of the parking for the block, those 2 blocks, 600 and the new one, is going to be on that land as well as access.
Yeah, access is going to be through the parcel to the south of the ACU site.
Yeah.
Because as I'm suggesting, the actual strip, if and when it's constructed, is going to be, certainly oriented towards the south end of the subject site. So the access is going to come from that parcel that's at the south and west of the subject site. And I'm, again, they can certainly use the parking both on that lot and the southern part of the ACU lot. It's going to be a common parking area, but primary access would be further south on that other vacant land parcel.
Now, the pad that they're showing, that's basically where the pad has to go. They can't put it further to the north, can they?
I do not know the answer to that. My suggestion would be no, for the reasons that I've discussed, but I cannot say with absolute certainty, Mr. Chairman.
Because they've got signage on the building that would not be visible if they did.
Yeah.
And I think ACU is trying to get into the corner for visibility, were they not?
Well, ACU's placement of the ACU building certainly is based on exposure as well.
Everybody's going to park. Okay, I'm good with that. Rebuttal? Jonathan?
Yes. Do you all have access to it?
Not yet. We will in a minute.
All right.
We have it too.
We've got it here somewhere. We just got to find it.
I think it's right at the
Rebuttal.
bottom.
Assessor's rebuttal.
Yeah.
Have you been through your rebuttal yet, Garrett?
I didn't have any.
You didn't have one? Okay. Fine.
Did you receive the rebuttal, Carrie?
Yes, I have indeed. Thank you.
You're welcome.
How come it says on, oh, that's the other, I'm sorry. Again, I'm dreaming here. Come on, open. Go ahead, Jonathan.
All right, thank you. So if you look on page 2, all I've done here is, it has kind of been discussed, but when I reviewed the appellant's comparables, I saw that ours had those transformers. I did want to look at all the other comparables he included and just, confirm that they had transformers as well, and they've built around them. To show that these comparables are very comparable. If you look at my first comparable here, 1400 Kenniston, I have in a red circle just shown where the transformers are located on the site, how the parking is set up. This is another dealership, so they're making the most use of their space, having parking all around it. If you scroll down to page 3, I just showed it's an interesting layout for a lot. It has that long kind of part at the bottom, and again, they're making the most out of their space, using it all for parking, where if it was maybe a commercial building, they wouldn't need that much parking, but they're adapting to what's given to them, and it's comparable in my mind. You have index number 2 on page 4. This is the most recent sale. This is the one that is becoming the Porsche dealership, and you'll see they're gonna have to build around these 5 transformers on the site, and that one sold for $28 before the reference date, which I would agree it's even worth more now as you get to the reference date. It's a great spot, but they are gonna have to build around it. They're gonna have to put a garbage bin somewhere on the site. That's something they have to do. So index 3 is just the older sale at the southwest corner of the lot where they ended up building apartments. They threw a transformer there. They built around it. They put out an area so you wouldn't walk to it, and then they have their garbage bins. If you turn to page 6, you'll see this one. This is right by the outlet mall. It's the hotel that's on the northeast side of the lot on Kenniston there. But the way they did their lot lines for these lots they're selling or having leased to develop, they put it right in the middle. So this one is, but they still have to build the buffer zones around it. They still have to, all these areas. And if you look across all the way to the east of this picture on page 6, you'll see they have their garbage bin area. So, when I did research this property, I did look up a permit, and there was a permit for early 2020 for a 10,000 square foot retail development on our subject. So it may not have shovels in the ground yet, but whatever does get built there is going to have to build more, some sort of more. They're going to pave more of it, have parking there, maybe in spots they can't build, and they're going to have to, put a garbage bin. Whether they share that garbage spot with ACU, I can't speak for what's going to happen, but in my mind, those are all realistic possibilities for that lot. And I don't think it's having as much of a change, a decrease in the value as Mr. Reimer is speaking to. Page 5, another one of the comparables, which is the Audi lot, and you can see. No, sorry, I just want to make sure I'm talking the right one here. But index 5, you can see where they've built the transformers, they built around, and they have parking right up to it. So again, I just wanted to show that in my mind, these are great, like apples to apples comparisons of lots, and the drop to 20 just seems like a lot to me, and that was the point of my rebuttal. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions on the rebuttal. So Mr. Spacek, let's go through this a little bit. And I'm on your page 2 now. Yes. So you've got the red circles, and that's where the utility boxes are located, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So and the blue lines are the lines of the it's essentially the roll number or the parcel lot lines, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you've got in this case granted with the configuration, and I think Mr. Spacek, that's where we're differing here is the effect of the configuration. So you got a configuration where these boxes are located within a couple of feet, it looks like, of the lot line, correct?
Correct.
So the only impact in this case, just as they've done here, is they can pave it around. They've got to give a few feet on each side and a sort of a significant chunk of that green space. Effectively, they've got a car length plus a little bit throughout the entire segment of that parcel, right on the lot line that they've left greenfield for these utility boxes, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so that configuration with the placement of those boxes where they are, that we can agree based on that specific placement would have little impact because it's just that segment. Now, it's page 3. I'm going to skip over that. That's the same property. So let's go to page 4, which is the proposed Porsche dealership, I believe, on that's fronting on Kenaston. So again, the placement of these utility boxes is immediately next to the lot line, correct?
Yes, they're close to the lot line.
So we can envision, again, if you were to envision this, you can certainly envision that there would be a buffer that would be around that segment, but it would have very, very minimal impact because the physical placement of these is very close to the lot line itself, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Similarly for the page 5, and this is 590 Sterling, the placement of the utility boxes is at the very southern end within feet of the lot line, correct?
It is, yes.
And on page 6, which is 495 Sterling line. So again, this is, are these, and I couldn't quite figure out what was going on in here. Are these straddling the lot line? Are these utility boxes?
Yes, well, it's, I didn't put it's included in the lot on this one. I just showed where it was, but it is right in between
so it's
the
right
two lots. It's
sure.
The larger developer put the lots there. Probably one of the reasons maybe.
Okay, and then lastly in page 7 again, so the utility boxes again here, and this is crucial. You've got this small area, but they're placed again very, very close to the lot line, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, but we can agree, and so now I'm going to go back to let's go back to if you would please, to my brief, page 9. So, Mr. Spacek, those boxes, and forget about the Assiniboine Credit Union access, forget about the garbage bin, but those utility boxes, the equivalent sort of configuration would suggest that the land area to the north, and that's leading to Sterling line, by the very same token, that would be the green space that would be required to not be developed, and that's what would be impeding the subject, would it not?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that it's not exactly the same. I'm not trying to say it's exactly the same as the others. All I'm trying to say is if you look at the larger lot that is in the portion there where they built the credit union and the other ones, the developer or owner split up these lots to be this way and this size to to maximize their utility. And this lot does end up having the transformers on it, and not the ideal, but the way they have the bins, I believe this should be valued as the whole lot. Like you explained it well, where you're saying, okay, even if we value it all, I'm saying it's $20 with it all. So I'm just trying to show that I don't believe it should be such a drop. It is much more comparable to the $28 lots on Kenaston, and just to take that into account, because I saw no pictures showing where the transformers were. But I do agree with you that the other lots, the transformers are closer to the lot line.
Well, but what I heard you just say, just so we're clear, we can agree that the possibility of any development, any commercial development, would end at the south of those utility boxes. Like, you're not putting buildings to the north. You're not.
No, absolutely not. You're putting garden, and maybe if you didn't have that garbage bin, you're going to build out that path where the drive-through is. You're going to put out more paving. You could probably squeeze in some more parking spots along the north lot line. The way they do it, I just think it makes it look worse than it is. But that's just my opinion when I did this property.
Sure. All right. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Those are my questions.
Richard?
No,
you have
I'm fine.
questions on the remote?
No.
Gary?
Just one quick question. Sorry, I'm just going to your rebuttal brief. I just want to confirm that 1400 Kenaston, that is the Mercedes dealership?
Mercedes, yes, I believe you're right, yes.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
And I'm good. Anything in summation?
Mr. Chairman, my preference would be to have summation at the end of sort of both of them, if Mr. Spacek's okay with that.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm not changing much on the next one.
Okay, let's move on to the next item then, shall we? That'll be 2020, number 4, correct?
Yes, I am ready if you are.
Ready.
All right, this is file number 20-648, roll number 10006777315, 610 Sterling Line Parkway. The only difference this one, we've moved to the 2020 assessment, which is based on April 1st, 2018. It has a slight increase in price per square foot for a total value of $2,296,000. Same size lot, 74,315. You will see my brief is identical. If you turn down to pay, except for page 3, you will see the updated valuation for this property. And the only difference is the square footage rate has went up to $30.90 a square foot. So, you know, to save some time here, you can scroll through. It's the same pictures. I've included the same comparables and again, the same argument. Thank you.
Gary, question?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Spacek, could we turn then to your page 3, please?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask incidentally that the previous questions asked and answered be carried forward to this matter?
Agreed.
Thank you. So, Mr. Spacek, the one additional comparable that you've got is comparable number 3. That's 700 Sterling Line Parkway.
Yes.
This sold closest to the reference date, our reference date of being now April 1 of 18. This one sold in February of 18, correct?
Yes, true.
And the area was very, very close to the subject at 89,000 square feet, 89,127.
Yes.
Okay. And this is also a parcel that is located to the south of Sterling Line, correct?
Yes.
And so if we turn to your page, the bottom of your page 4, and by the way, I want to thank you for putting these aerial maps in because my aerial maps didn't go out far enough and yours came out much more clearly. So it provides a great frame of reference for a number of these sales. So the comparable that we're referring to now, that's number 3, just to the west of the subject. And our subject, when you look on that map, is sort of to the right-hand side at again, with the access around the roundabout. Also to the south of Sterling Line, correct?
That sounds right.
All right. And that one sold for $22.95 a square foot just prior to the reference date.
It did, yes.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, those are my questions. Thank you.
Richard?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Gary?
No questions, thank you.
Oh, do you have any questions, Jonathan?
I do not. No, thank you.
Okay. Any rebuttals? Anything that I'm missing here?
I have no rebuttal, but I'm hoping to quickly present my submission.
Yeah. No, we've got that. And you're up. Present.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could I then, for the sake of brevity, if I could ask the board members and Mr. Spacek just to go right to page 10. Again, with all the previous commentary, ask that be carried forward to this matter, same asset we're dealing with. So our sales in this case, on page 10, there's a sales listing, and the one additional comparable that I've included is 495 Sterling Parkway. That sold in April 29th of 2016 for $23.80. That is so with that parcel, the average and median average there is $22, median is $23.80 a foot. And for the same reasons we've talked about, I do continue to suggest there is a negative influence at work here. But even in light of the comparable sales and in view of that, the 700 Sterling Line transaction, certainly we're suggesting an overall rate for the entire parcel of $21.50 a square foot, which equals a rate of $25.95 a square foot for what I've counted the net area as calculated to be 61,350 feet. So we're requesting the 2020 supplementary assessment be reduced to a value of $1,592,000. Thank you.
1,592,000. Jonathan, questions?
I have no questions for the appellant. Thank you.
Richard?
None, thank you.
Gary?
No questions, thank you.
I've got no questions. Anything in summation, gentlemen?
No, I am good. I just went over it in rebuttal. Thank you.
Good. Gary?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Suggesting the configuration is a negative influence in this case, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, gentlemen. This will conclude the matters for today.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
That's all.
Have a good day,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.
I'm ending for all, Helen.